Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is committing gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. He was addressing a ceremony to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in Islamabad. Qureshi said the fascist ideology of the Indian government is a threat to regional peace. UN resident coordinator in Pakistan said the Kashmir conflict must be resolved by peaceful means. The Financial Action Task Force says Pakistan has successfully complied with 21 out of 27 points of an internationally agreed action plan. In a statement, the global watchdog said the country will remain on its grey list until February next year. The United Nations says rival factions in Libya have reached an agreement for a permanent ceasefire throughout the country. The deal was signed in Geneva days after both sides agreed to reopen land and air routes across the front lines. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called it a fundamental step towards peace and stability in the country. Well, these were the top stories news in detail coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. Start from Pakistan, whose Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says India is committing gross human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. He was addressing a ceremony to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations in Islamabad. Details in this report.
He said the fascist ideology of the Indian government is a threat to regional peace. Qureshi said India continues to violate the ideals of the UN, especially in the occupied valley. At this occasion, the foreign minister also highlighted Pakistan's stellar contributions to the UN peacekeeping missions. He said Pakistan has contributed over 200,000 peacekeepers to 46 UN missions around the world since 1960. Meanwhile, UN resident coordinator in Pakistan, Julian Haney, said the Kashmir conflict must be resolved by peaceful means. Commenting on the ongoing Afghan peace talks, he said the UN backs Pakistan's sincere efforts in this regard.
Meanwhile, in occupied Kashmir, former Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti has lashed out at the Indian government for its unilateral actions in the valley. In her first press conference after being released from detention, she called for the restoration of the occupied valley's special status. Mufti said she will not contest any election until Article 370 is restored. Separately, in Pakistan, hundreds of people took to the streets in Islamabad to protest against Indian brutalities in the occupied valley. They chanted slogans against Indian Prime Minister Modi and called for a global action against New Delhi.
Purpose is the abrogation of Article 370, 35A, release of all Kashmiri political prisoners and Kashmiris to get their promised right, according to the UN, the right to self-determination, which we are still waiting for. We Kashmiris don't want any deal, no packages, nothing at all. We've laid our lives not just for any compromise. We've laid our lives for the right to self-determination, and that is our ultimate goal as per the UN resolutions. So that is the main focus, because Pakistan is one of the major parties of the UN conflict, and every Pakistani's heart beats with the people of Kashmir. So this is a way of grassroots mobilization drive all over Pakistan. Inshallah, will be moving forward. But today's call is from Islamabad to...
Now, the Financial Action Task Force says Pakistan has successfully complied with 21 out of 27 points of action. The global watchdog said the country will remain on its grey list until February next year. FATF President Marcus announced the decision after the body's three-day plenary session came to an end. This comes despite India's efforts to push Pakistan into the blacklist. Earlier, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said Pakistan took concrete measures to check money laundering and terror financing. Now, moving on, the United Nations says rival factions in Libya have reached an agreement for a permanent ceasefire across the country. Speaking to the media, UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called it a fundamental step towards peace and stability in the country. He urged all stakeholders and regional actors to respect the provisions of the ceasefire agreement. Earlier, the UN mission in Libya expressed similar sentiments, hoping the truce will allow displaced refugees to return home. The deal was reached days after both sides agreed to reopen land and air routes across the front lines. Now moving to Afghanistan, where 20 government soldiers have been killed in the Kashmir district of southwestern Nimroz province. District Governor Jalil Ahmed Watan Dost accused the Taliban of attacking a military outpost. The governor said the Taliban have also taken 6 hostages. The Taliban have not responded to the claim yet. Earlier, the Taliban claimed they had destroyed a helicopter of government forces in the Zabul province. A spokesman for the Taliban said all troops on the boat military helicopter were killed. Meanwhile, a U.S. media report says Washington is assisting the Taliban in a covert operation in Afghanistan. The Washington Post report claims U.S. drones are conducting airstrikes against ISIS in order to help the Taliban. It says this help is being made in a clandestine manner to avoid getting it officially validated. Following an agreement with the Taliban in February, the U.S. reduced its military strength in Afghanistan with only 8,600 troops stationed there. Now, Iran has blacklisted U.S. Ambassador to Iraq Matthew and 2 other diplomats in a tit-for-tat move. The Foreign Ministry said the U.S. envoy played a central role in coordinating several terrorist attacks in Iraq. It said Teller was also involved in the assassination of Iran's General Qasem Soleimani in January this year. Earlier, Washington blacklisted Iran's ambassador to Iraq, accusing him of supporting Iraqi militias who target U.S. forces. The U.S. also imposed sanctions on 5 Iranian entities for allegedly attempting to interfere in the upcoming presidential elections. Now, Tehran denies the allegations. The 2 sides are at odds over a range of issues, including the 2015 nuclear deal. Moving on now, the Saudi-led military coalition says it destroyed 2 explosive-laden drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels. The state media quoted the coalition as saying the drones were launched at civilian targets in the southern region of the kingdom. Cross-border attacks by Yemeni rebels have escalated since May, when a truce prompted by the coronavirus pandemic expired. In 2015, the coalition intervened in Yemen after the Houthis ousted the internationally recognized government from Sana'a. Now, Israel has once again conducted airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. Israel's defense forces say their warplanes targeted military sites and facilities of Hamas. In a statement, it said the strike was a retaliation to 2 rockets fired earlier from the Gaza Strip. It said Israel's Iron Dome defense system intercepted one of the rockets while one fell in an open field. No casualties have been reported from the incident so far. Earlier, Israeli jets also bombed the agricultural lands in the Gaza Strip. Now, Russia says it's concerned over Israel's plans to expand settlements in the West Bank. A foreign ministry spokesperson said Israel's projects include the construction of sections and the separation barrier in East Jerusalem. Maria Zakharova said this will mean the annexation of Palestinian territories in accordance with the so-called deal of the century. She stressed the Palestinian problems remain acute and its resolution will help develop a unifying agenda. Israel has approved the construction of over 12,000 new illegal settlement units in the occupied West Bank. Moving on now, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Ankara will cooperate with Tehran to ensure peace and stability in Syria. He was speaking to Iran's President Hassan Rouhani over the phone. The 2 leaders vowed to make joint efforts to maintain a ceasefire in Syria's Idlib province. Views were also exchanged on the ongoing Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and bilateral ties, among other issues. Also, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says the country has tested the Russian S-400 air defense system. Speaking to reporters in Istanbul, Erdogan said the U.S. objections on the issue don't matter. He said Turkey will not act at the behest of the US as NATO member Greece had already purchased Russian S-300 missiles. The president said Ankara will continue testing military equipment. Earlier, Washington said Ankara's purchase of the Russian systems compromises NATO defenses. Now in Sri Lanka, the parliament has given President Gotabaya Rajapaksa sweeping powers to appoint top officials and dissolve the legislature. The 20th Amendment to the Constitution was passed by 156 lawmakers in the 225-member House. The amendment will allow the Sri Lankan president to hold ministries. The new constitutional clause also lifted a ban on dual citizens from holding a political office, which was strongly advocated by Rajapaksa. Meanwhile, the opposition has accused President Rajapaksa of becoming a constitutional dictator. Now, Beijing says the US is bullying countries to pick sides over their ties to China. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian made these remarks in a press briefing, commenting on the US telling Sri Lanka to make difficult choices over relations with China. Zhao Lijian said any attempts to pressure other countries will not succeed. Earlier, a United States State Department official said Sri Lanka should review American investment options instead of sticking with China. Dean Thompson said Washington offers transparent and sustainable economic development. Now, in the final US presidential debate, Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden clashed over coronavirus, racism, economy and foreign policy. Details in this report.
With just 12 days to the U.S. presidential election, President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden faced off at the debate stage for the second time. While the two American politicians did not hold back, this debate was way less chaotic as the first one. COVID-19 took center stage early in the debate, where Trump boasted success and promised a vaccine by year-end, while Biden held him responsible for deaths of millions.
220,000 Americans dead. If you hear nothing else I say tonight, hear this. Anyone who's responsible for not taking control, in fact, not saying I take no responsibility initially, anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America.
Biden accused Trump of displeasing allies of the U.S. by cozying up to China, Russia and North Korea. But Trump said his diplomacy has saved millions of lives by avoiding a nuclear war with North Korea.
He said the biggest problem we have with North Korea. He indicated we will be in a war with North Korea. Guess what? It would be a nuclear war, and he does have plenty of nuclear capability. In the meantime, I have a very good relationship with him. Different kind of a guy, but he probably thinks the same thing about me. We have a different kind of a relationship. We have a very good relationship, and there's no war.
Biden described climate change as an existential threat to humanity and attacked Trump for cutting curbs on polluters. But Trump defended his decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, saying he will not sacrifice tens of millions of jobs.
Welcome back now, moving on with the news. Now, the U.S. death toll from COVID-19 has crossed 223,000, with more than 8.4 million infections. The second worst hit country, India's caseload has exceeded 7.7 million, with over 117,000 fatalities. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 1.1 million lives while infecting over 41.6 million people. Details in this report.
COVID-19 is spreading faster than ever before, shattering the record for daily global cases twice in this week alone. The outbreak in the U.S. is worsening as regulators approve the antiviral drug remdesivir. In Europe, France has extended curbs after a record high daily cases, while Greece is set to impose new curbs in most affected areas. German armed forces have been called to help Frankfurt's overwhelmed healthcare institutions.
It is important because we are not coping with tracking all the names. With the help of an experienced army and the management of the army at national level, we can avoid burdening the system, and we can have a chance to find out where the infected person is, where he or she is, and what we can do about it.
Russia's death tally has topped the 25,000 mark, while over in India, another 690 people lost their lives in the past 24 hours and over 54,000 tested positive. The West Bengal state has reported its biggest daily tally of infections after thousands gathered in the streets for a major Hindu festival.
People are thinking that the coronavirus pandemic is over. They're not wearing masks. There is no social distancing. You can see here, very few people are wearing masks. Only 1 or 2 people are wearing it. If we ask someone to wear masks, they say, there is nothing. There is no coronavirus.
Meanwhile, Australia has decided to partially lift the cap on the number of citizens and permanent residents allowed to return each week.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, COVID-19 has killed 13 people overnight, raising the death toll to 6,715. The Health Ministry said 736 people tested positive for the virus in the past 24 hours. The ministry said there are over 9,000 active coronavirus cases in the country. It said out of over 326,000 countrywide cases, more than 309,000 people have recovered. The ministry said some 142,000 cases have been detected in the eastern province, while Punjab has reported over 102,000 cases. Now, Britain has signed a trade deal with Japan, marking its first major post-Brexit agreement. In a ceremony in Tokyo, UK Trade Secretary Liz Truss and Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi put their names to the pact. The deal was reached in September, 3 months after formal negotiations began. It is touted to boost trade between the two countries by nearly $20 billion. The deal largely preserves the terms under which the United Kingdom traded with Tokyo as part of the European Union. Moving on, Russia's President Vladimir Putin says he is open to the idea of a military alliance between Moscow and Beijing. Speaking at a video conference, Putin said such an alliance cannot be ruled out. Putin said Russia and China regularly hold joint military exercises and have achieved great success in military cooperation. Putin said the future development in this area can only be known with time. Turning to the possibility of China joining the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, Putin said Russia supports the idea, but it is up to the United States to invite China to the negotiations. Now, the peak pollution season has arrived in India, with air quality levels dipping and monuments shrouded in smog. Details in this report.
A thick blanket of smog covered large swaths of northern India as air quality index was recorded at very poor level, bordering to severe levels. The Indian capital of New Delhi continued its run with the dangerous air levels, with monuments and buildings covered in thick smog. The situation was not very different in New Delhi's satellite city of Gurugram.
There is smog everywhere I look. There is no sign of sunlight. The pollution is rising.
Agra city, home to the iconic Mughal-era Taj Mahal monument, recorded air quality as poor. The shining white marble mausoleum, which can be spotted from kilometers away in normal weather, was only visible as a blurred silhouette on a hazy Friday morning.
Those who have asthma problem or other respiratory issues, this pollution is highly problematic for them. It presents breathing problems to them.
This has raised concerns whether pollution leads to more severe complications among patients infected by the novel coronavirus.
Now, the Royal Opera House has sold a painting by British artist David Hockney for over $16 million at an auction in London. The artwork was sold to raise funds amid the coronavirus crisis. Hockney's portrait of Sir David Webster, painted in 1971, is a tribute to the former chief of the venue. The Royal Opera House says it's facing the biggest financial crisis in history. The London venue, home of International Opera and the Royal Ballet, is the UK's biggest arts employer. Now, an immersive theatre show of The Great Gatsby has returned in London after a COVID-19 induced break. The accessory of 2020, the face mask, was combined with 1920s themed fineries by guests who observed social distance. More in this report.
Billed by organizers as the first press night of the West End autumn season since the start of the pandemic, strict COVID-19 measures were in place as the Mayfair Townhouse hosted London's The Great Gatsby show.
This is the hardest thing we've ever done, but if you sit and listen to those audience members, cheer our performers on, and you see the cast members just do their job really, really well. It's honestly one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So I would say try. I'd say fight for it. And there are people out there who need this in their lives, you know.
The show is set in the fantasy world of F. Scott Fitzgerald's lead character, Jay Gatsby, with people invited to attend one of his infamously opulent parties. In normal times, Gatsby is staged as an immersive experience, and audience participation is a key feature, where audiences or guests would normally dance, sip champagne, mingle with actors, and get invited to visit other rooms in the Gatsby mansion. The production has now been reimagined and reset as an Art Deco masquerade ball.
We've had to make some fundamental changes to the show, so there are some scenes that we used to have. For instance, we used to have a 250-person Charleston. Now, that was really gorgeous to watch, but it's probably not the most responsible thing to do. So we've turned that into a new scene. So a lot of the key creatives, the original creatives for the production, came back to the rehearsal room, which again is a very rare thing.
By audience, London's theatre scene is slightly bigger than the Broadway in New York. Theatres in London saw revenue of nearly £800 million last year, with the average ticket costing around £50. As the curtain fell, audiences leaving the venue were both in high spirits and nostalgic.
Well, now the UAE's newest attraction has broken the Guinness record for the world's largest fountain. Let's have a look.
Located at the pond in Dubai's waterfront Palm Jumeirah area, the Palm Fountain was unveiled in a launch that was live-streamed across the world. The fountain spans over 14,000 square feet of seawater.
They span 14,000 square feet in size, which is what we're trying to do today, is to attempt to be the world's largest, get the record, Guinness Book of Record for the world's largest fountain in the world. And one quite interesting part is that we have these super shooters, 128 of them, and they reach up to 105 meters.
Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to announce
the Palm Fountain was crowned the Guinness record holder for the world's largest fountain. It stole the title from the Bampo Moonlight Rainbow Fountain in South Korea, which measures 2,519 square meters in size. Adorned with 3,000 LED lights, Dubai's only multicolored fountain will be open to the public year-round.
I think it's another add-on for the tourist industry in particular, when that obviously starts picking up following the COVID situation at the moment. But it's also just a lovely setting for residents, families, friends visiting family from other countries.
The fountain will have 3-minute dancing water displays set to music, running every 30 minutes.
Well, the cackling of children brings joy to their parents, but not all are lucky in this regard. Some families in Iran are choosing to have only one child because of economic restraints. To remedy the situation, hyper-realistic dolls are acting as surrogates for families who cannot afford to have more children. Details in this report.
24-year-old Maryam Aghi has brought happiness to many Iranian homes. She designs these dolls, adds color in the silicone baby's face, and dresses it to make it look as lifelike as possible. After completing her second reborn baby doll, the orders started to roll in.
It has been about 3 or 4 months since I started this work. After making my second doll, many orders have been coming in. The second doll was much more realistic than the previous one. After making my second doll, I said that from now on I can take customer orders.
Reborn baby dolls can also be used to help grieving mothers cope with the loss of a child. Psychologists and family planning experts say it's quite common for families to seek other ways to fill the void of a child.
Among my friends, most of them would like to have 2 or 3 children, but because of the bad economic situation, they cannot. They're unsure about the future, so they prefer to provide a good life for just one child in their families.
Official statistics indicate that Iran will be the oldest country in the world in the next 30 years. 10% of Iran's population is elderly, with the population growth dropping below 1%. Baghye says having a real sibling cannot be replaced like this, but a few parents are happy to provide their children something to play with.
Well, now snooker is a hard enough game as it is, and it takes time to settle into the rhythm to play in cricket shots. But Pakistan's Mohammad Ikram has taken it to a whole new level as he mastered to play the game using only his mouth. He flexes the muscles around his mouth and pushes the cue ball with his lower lip, making a shot straight into the corner pocket. Details in this report.
Mohammad Ikram was born without arms, but that did not stop him from excelling. The 32-year-old is now well known among the local snooker community for being able to play the game by using only his mouth. His opponents apply chalk to their cue sticks as Ikram lines up his mouth just behind the cue ball for another shot.
He would come to the club and ask that he be allowed to play. We would look at his arms and feel that he was unable to play, although he said he would play with his face. He insisted that we allow him to play a few games and prove himself. When he did that, we saw that he was actually very good, so we allowed him to play. He wins from the players as well as loses. Sometimes he's really very good.
From an early age, Ikram watched other children in his home city of Samundri playing snooker and developed a liking for the game. He eventually began practicing in secret, hitting a cue ball with his mouth on an empty table.
God has not given me arms, but He has given me courage, and I have used that spirit to fulfill my ambition, so no one should lose hope. Everyone should keep struggling to attain their goals.
Practice paid off, and Ikram has gained respect of snooker players in Samundri. Ikram's parents say they are brimming with pride and are extremely happy for his success.
Well, more news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, the Wall Street stocks have edged higher with investors expecting progress in talks on the next coronavirus aid bill. A decline of 11% in Intel shares pressured the Nasdaq Composite Index, while the S&P 500 index hovered just above the flat line. The shares of Gilead Sciences jumped 4% as its antiviral medicine became the first and only drug approved for treating COVID-19 patients. Meanwhile, the oil prices remained steady as Russia indicated support for extending output cuts. While European markets are trading higher today as investors monitor signs of progress towards a U.S. stimulus deal, the pan-European stock 600 gained close to 1%, with banks jumping 3%. London's FTSE 100 climbed over 1%. In Italy, the FTSE MIB added more than 1%. The CAC 40 in Paris has advanced over 1%, while Frankfurt's DAX is trading more than 0.5% higher. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with mainland Chinese bourses and Australia's ASX 200 shedding. South Korea's Kospi, Japanese shares and Hong Kong's Hang Seng made marginal gains. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. With the weather updates, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.